Hello, if you've been here before, welcome back. If not, hi. My name is David. I make videos talking about media that I want to talk about. This is my thoughts, ideas, and theories for the next 4 episodes of the Magnus Protocol, horror media podcast produced by Rusty Quill, created by Jonathan Sims and Alexander J. Newell. We know them, we love them. If you're here watching this, you know exactly what I'm doing here. This is for episodes 43 to 46, and so I'll be covering the 4 episodes. This is trying to make my own sort of ideas as to what is happening in the story in this mystery without outside interference until after I record and take my notes. After this, I'll go online and be like, hey, what is everyone talking about here for this episode and for the next episodes? So thank you so much for coming on this journey with me. Just some housekeeping things. This is not today at least, but I believe that by the time that this video comes out, I will have moved, so the setup here will be slightly different, or very different actually. I will be in a different apartment, and so I'm not sure if I'm going to be filming exactly here, but you'll see the change. Don't worry, I just moved. I have a season 2 primer where I've covered some of the lore and information that I will be talking about as if you're familiar with it in this video. So if you don't know about that, check out if you hear me say something that you're confused about, there might be clarification in the season 2 primer, so go check that out if you so desire. I also have a playlist where I have the thoughts, ideas, and theories for the last few episodes as well. I have a video for 31 to 34, 35 to 38, 39 to 42. This is 43 to 46. And so it'll all be within a playlist for you to easily access if you so desire. The season 2 primer is also there. And yeah, let's get into this episode. Episode 43, Sink or Swim. CAT1RB4153 the dates. The description is idolatry, music, / compulsion, drowning. CAT1 is going to be an agent who is going to be Monique Bakayoko, and it is rank B. The DPHW is death 4, pain 1, helplessness 5, and weird 3. The date of the event was February 27th, 2010, and the date of the assessment was June 11th, 2024. The author of this case, besides the usual editing of Alexander J. Newell and Jonathan Sims, this was the main statement was written by John Ware, who has written for, I believe he's the co-owner of, written for I Am an SQ, and definitely the co-owner of the Silverses. Both, I listened to like 6 episodes of I Am an SQ, and I was like, I liked it, but not enough for me to want to continue. And Silverse is definitely something I want to watch in the future after I watch Malevolent. And so definitely going to do Malevolent, Silverses, and then go back to I Am an SQ probably. Because, yeah, John Ware, you're writing here, loved it. This aired July 17th, 2025. I was celebrating a birthday, so I am at night after work, really tired doing this. You're welcome. Brief summary of this episode. Klaus and Oscar Jarrett and Diva sings and drowns people. The entities are dark and the vast. Tentative entities are the dark and the vast. And in scene 1, Alice and Heinrich Unheimlich are at the address that Heinrich Unheimlich had discovered, and it is at the Old Wolf Tattoos. It's in German. Heinrich translates it to English. There's a joke where Alice is like, do you want a tattoo? And Heinrich is like, I've already worked on this skin. I don't want to tarnish it. And she's like, is that? I think he means that his skin is wood or it is leather. At this moment, Heinrich restrains himself because he had planned to get Colin alone and scare him. Heinrich said Colin had called him a safe Angstjäger, and he didn't like that. And so he wanted to do reparations, and so he was going to do something. Alice is like, you were going to kill him? She was like, no, I just want to scare him. Which, cool. She gets really scared here. She's like, what are you going to do now? And he's like, nothing. I'm going to help you. And both of them do wish that Colin wasn't dead. Heinrich for one reason, Alice for another. But they both wish that Colin wasn't dead, which is nice sentiment from both of them. There are pictures in the front of the windows of the tattoo place, which are tattoo samples, and some of them have alchemical symbols. Alice points out mercury, sulfur, and copper. Alice asks Heinrich how long this place has been open, and he says that it's been here since at least the wall coming down, the Berlin Wall, but the records are sparse, so it could be a little bit longer. And so he goes inside to speak with the tattooist because Alice cannot speak German. In scene 2, Heinrich is leaving the tattoo shop, and we hear the voice of the tattooist, who is voice acted by Niels Schifferman. Just briefly, just finishing off the conversation, I translated it. It's just like, are you sure that was it? Yeah, I'd leave. Okay, bye. And Heinrich finds out that the programmer, the KS, that he had found for Colin, is named Klaus Schweitzer. Klaus! Klaus was a regular to the tattoo parlor in the 80s, and he had collected photographs of rare tattoos from Oscar Jarrett. Both names, Klaus and Oscar. I did not expect them to have them both together. And he had rented a room upstairs and filled it with computer equipment. And Alice is ready to go into that room and look at all the computers. But Heinrich says it's all gone. Klaus is gone. Klaus and all of his computer was taken by the Stasi. Which, in case you forgot, the Stasi is short for this word, which means the Ministry of State Security of Germany. We cut to scene 3, where Celia is on a phone with Alice, and we can hear Alice's voice, but can't make out what she's saying. And Celia is along the same line because the line is cutting off, but she does hear about Oscar Jarrett. She asks out loud, who is Oscar Jarrett? And she keeps talking with Alice, and like the line keeps cutting off, so she keeps having to repeat, ask her to say that again, and eventually the line just drops. And so she's just, all right, whatever. And Celia returns to the workload and begins a case, which in scene 4, Norris/Martin begins reading out a collections info form. All of this is in French. This was translated, so it's not exactly perfect. It's Information Technology and Traces Service. It sounds a lot smoother in French. And I believe it's supposed to be Technology and Tracing Information Services. That's like the actual like grammatically correct way in English. Not sure. I didn't find anything online about it, but it is what it is. And it is a PDF transcript of an interview, supposedly, I assumed, recorded with a British student. And this PDF was collected by David Collins, who is a SOCO, which we saw in 41. SOCO, I learned, is a scene of crime officer. And the form is saying to return the PDF to England, to the Northwest Long-Term Evidence Storage. Put a pin on that. And it is an interview of Monique Bakayoko by Prim Rosewell in Paris, in Monique's apartment on the 21st of February 2010. Note, of course, that the collection was filed on the 27th of February, so this is 6 days prior. And so her name's Prim Rosewell, but I keep wanting to just say Primrose Everdeen. So if I say Primrose or whatever, you know what I mean. And Monique Bakayoko, I'll just call her Diva, because that's what she makes Prim call her, Diva. So that's who I'm talking about. And I'll let you know when she actually becomes Diva. But yeah. And so Prim begins talking about Diva's illustrious career and compares her to Maria Callas, who is a famous opera singer. And Diva gets a little insulted and she calls Roswell a child. Oh yeah, because I also kept thinking of her name was Roswell. It's Rosewell. Prim. My notes have so many different names for 2 different women. So she calls Prim a child for comparing her to like a world famous opera singer, and Prim, I guess, is also a little insulted as she would think her that low, and so she like compares her to more recent, more niche opera singers, and then that sort of gets Diva on her side. And also Prim says that she saw Diva's performance of Medea when she was 9 years old, and when she talks about that, Diva reminisces about the special effects, so now they're slightly at equal footing. And then she asks Prim, what question do you want to ask? And Prim asks, why did you stop singing? And Diva again is like, oh my god, this again, listen, it's all public record. There was an accident in July of 1998. It was a capsized boat in the Adriatic Sea during a storm. And that's why she stopped singing. And Prim does not accept that answer. She says, no, you had minor injuries, you had an upcoming concert, and you just abruptly left. I don't think that's the reason. And Diva says that it is not a pleasant story to tell and that some people have said it's scary. And Prim pleads to her, please tell me what happened. And so before she starts, she asks Prim if she knows the definition of diva, because she's been called a diva before, a diva. And Prim, off the top of the head, real quickly, this girl is smart, says, one who died and became divine. And then that's when Monique Bakayoko becomes diva. She asks Prim to call her only diva. And Diva says yes, the accident was the reason she stopped singing. She was sailing with a Pietro. She doesn't explain who Pietro is, I guess like a suitor. And he was showing her off his richness. He was on a yacht in the Adriatic Sea. And there was a storm that began and the ship capsized. I think Pietro died here. And Diva got stuck in an air bubble in an upturned cabin, which is already just horrifying. And she screamed a lot as she was trapped underneath. She had her life vest, there was an air bubble. The ship was capsized in a way where the air was trapped, so she had enough to breathe, but they never brought up the idea that the air could run out, but she was there. And I guess, when you go on a boat, you would tell someone, hopefully, and you would know you'd be rescued. She just had to wait to be rescued. However, after the first hour, there's a moment where she feels like the ship was shifted around as if something was grabbing hold of it, and she thought it was rescuers. But in reality, it was something else. She felt a current of water, and then something brushed against her leg for a second. And she was really scared about that. And then a second thing brushed against her leg, and then she felt a scratch or a bite. She realizes the thing that is grabbing onto her is a hand, long fingers and unnaturally gray, reaching up from below. And when she realizes that, she kicks out. Terror surges through her. She kicks out in fear and defense, and the hand grabs onto her wrist and pulls her into the water. And in that moment, when she's in the water, it is dark and endless sea filled with fleshy white shapes. And there's hundreds of tiny little things coming out from the void to grab at her. And also, when she goes into the water, there is no more ship around her. She is in the dark void of the sea, being dragged down. And I guess she manages to kick the hand off and returns back up to the surface of the ship, where she's trapped once again. When she goes up to back up to the ship, right? I was in. We're stepping away from the story for a second. I was so invested. The idea of something touching her underwater in the dark water, I assume she cannot see anything there either. Terrifying. In the dark void. Terrifying. I was so invested in it. And then Prim asks, what did you do, diva? And I remember listening to the episode. I was driving to work. And she says that, and that I just could not. That took me out of it. And I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. She's called a diva for a reason. I get the themes. I get it. But she asks her, what did you do, diva? And that sounds like any other gay, homosexual gay talking to someone else, being like, so what did you do, diva? And it took me out of it, And people on Tumblr I've seen have been like, oh my god, diva. and I know why she's being called a diva. I get it. But also, it sounds so much like every other gay man I know, me included, calling someone diva just to, paint them in a nice light. So, in the moments after, when Prim calls her diva, it feels less like that. It feels more like a title of like one who became divine. But in that one moment, what did you do, diva? It's like, are we going to the club or something? Anyway, she comes up to the surface of the air bubble and she begins to sing for hours. And she references Scheherazade, who told stories to postpone her death at the hands of the king whom she married. And those stories are the basis of the 1001 Nights, Arabian Nights. Soon after her singing, she sings her voice hoarse. She hears a helicopter arrive and she stops singing. And in that moment, when she stops singing and she hears a helicopter, she hears like a banging. And it sounds like hands on the hull of the ship banging. And it sounds like applause, like a huge crowd applauding her after her performance in this deep and dark ocean. And it's just silent. And then she's saved. And then soon after, she is recovering from this encounter. Her doctor says she cannot talk or sing for a while, so she's been silent for weeks, has not been allowed to sing for weeks. And so the venue that had hired her to have her concert is getting worried that she's either getting cold feet or she's too wounded or something. And so they sit her in front, or place her in front of two sitting producers, two of them, and an old pianist. And they tell her to sing, to prove that she can sing so they can maintain their, I guess, investment in her for this concert. And when she's there, the lights on the stage dim. And in that moment, she feels like she's back in the dark, deep water. And she feels that same feeling of terror, isolation, darkness, and void all around her. I said those words for a reason. And she wants to sing again. But this time, she sings and she feels joy. And she says that the power that she felt was changed. And like obviously there's the power of like singing, of having a strong voice, of having a talent. But she specifically says she felt that the power changed and she felt joy at it. And it's the same kind of singing she did in the water. And then when she finishes, all of a sudden, the two producers and the pianist all begin writhing in their seats. Black water begins to trail out of their mouths and their nostrils, and their skin tears as fingers and hands rip out from inside them. And the three men have their bodies just broken open to have these pale hands coming out and clapping. They are applauding her performance, and it is beautiful. Then later, an ambulance arrives, and they say that the bodies, which have now returned to their whole, they're not broken anymore, were victims of stroke. And so she no longer wants to perform to normal audiences, and she had found the best audience in the water. She says that they give her the best reviews straight to her and to the mortician when the bodies are found. So obviously implying that when she sings, the things in the water break through the bodies to clap for her. And so then she threatens Prim, and Prim wants to leave. And really interesting here, Diva says to Prim, "Why don't you want to listen? Don't you want to listen to my voice? Don't you want to listen to the truth in my voice?" Which is just an interesting way to put it. And Prim seems to plead to survive, to not be killed. But she also has this sort of, like, the performance of Alexander Daniel and the transcript says that she's sort of entranced by Diva. And then the data is corrupted and the transcript ends. We cut to scene 5 where Celia sighs. And she says that she hates the wet ones, which made me laugh so hard when I was driving and I heard that because I was just I was recovering from the statement from Diva and Prim most likely dying and the tension there. And then this was such a great breaker of tension because yeah, the wet ones are pretty not I wouldn't say pretty bad, but like they are pretty gnarly. And Celia finishes up what she's doing, and all of a sudden Gwen rushes out of her office, and Celia tries to stop her and tell her what Alice had told her on the phone, but Gwen says she's going to a meeting, so she's going to leave. And Celia says that it can wait for tomorrow, but Gwen says she's not going to be in tomorrow, so just send her a one-page report, okay? Bye! And she exits in a hurry, and Celia sighs and returns back to work, and the episode ends. So, notes. I really like this episode. I really enjoyed the writing here, and there's just one thing that is getting slightly on my nerves, but it's more of a me thing than a story thing. So I'll get to that there. But yeah, overall, this episode really well written. Loved Diva. The tattooist is inspired but not powered by Jared, which I wanted to note because as we saw in 5-0, which Ink 5-0 and Oscar Jared have been mentioned in tandem the entire time, but Ink 5-0 was never talked about in this episode. Makes sense, considering what is occurring, who's learning all this, but I did want to note Ink 5-0 is in connection with Oscar Jared. I have more notes about that. But the tattooist right now has samples of the alchemical symbols, mercury, copper, sulfur, but it seems to be less of being powered, but more just being inspired, because we know that Klaus found pictures, and so the guy's like probably like, that looks like an interesting shape to do, but he's obviously not doing anything with it. Unless I'm wrong. Klaus is the programmer of Freddy. Klaus is the same person that Lena tried to kill and failed. So does that mean that the OIR is trying to cover their tracks? Why would they want to kill the programmer? He was their IT guy, right? Now, was Klaus looking for other Einsteigers for Freddy, like Heinrich Unheimlich? Was he looking for past ones that he could just filter in through? Was he doing research? Or was this like a personal interest, like a personal hobby, like in 5-0? Not sure. So, like I said, Oscar Jared is mentioned in tandem with Ink 5-0 a lot. Ink 5-0 draws power from the tattoos that they get inspired from by Oscar Jared. We first heard about Oscar Jared in episode 11, Marked, where Ink 5-0 breaks into the graveyard and talks to like a guy and says that the tattoo that they find on this man, the dead body, is an original Oscar Jared. And then episode 20, Social Stigma, obviously we have Gwen taking Ink 5-0's statement where they talk about getting inspiration and drawing power from the tattoos that Oscar Jared made. In episode 40, Public Image, Heinrich Unheimlich had stated that the Stasi had hired Klaus to program stuff. Now, it looks like the Stasi had taken Klaus's stuff and him as well. So it looks like they, like the OIR, are trying to cover their tracks. Also, because of that, I'm not sure if he was killed or had died, because the way that Heinrich was saying, I feel like it is a language barrier thing, but also says that Klaus was taken away. Now, I'm not sure if that's arrested or his body was found and they took the body away. I think functionally it's about the same. Don't think that they're going to find Klaus, but they're definitely going to find something about him. You know, they might find Klaus. Maybe. Who knows? So about the case, I have a handful of notes. The entities, dark or vast. So obviously there's markers of dark water and just the void of the ocean. I feel the fear wasn't that focused and it was very like a lot of different things, especially when you're trapped in a situation like that. But I did want to note that there are some episodes of Magnus Archives that have similar stuff here. And I'm not saying that this is proof that this is dark or vast, because obviously, as we know, the dread powers are not present here in their current forms of archives. They are in some other form, other interpretation by human minds in a protocol, something to do with alchemy. Not sure exactly what, but at least there are some parallels, there's some connections, etc. Anyways, in 109 Nightfall, obviously we have dark water. I've mentioned I loved the dark water implementation in this episode and wish there was more of, which is why I really enjoy this episode, because there's more of this dark water thing. I wanted to avoid mentions of anything about the vastness of the ocean, because that encompasses a lot of things, but specifically for an episode of The Vast, 1, 2, 4 left hanging in the gondolas, in that European gondola thing. The pilot of that gondola was grabbed by a gray, unnatural, unhuman hand, grabbed and tossed off the gondola into the vast. Simon Fairchild was there briefly, and there was the implication that there were things crawling on the wires, but they were never described. It was implied that the statement giver said, "I'm not gonna think about that, about the things that crawled." No. That description felt very similar to the gray, fleshy description of the figures in the void. Also, slightly differently, slightly adjacent, but also I wanted to point out, in a 142 scrutiny, the woman who was trapped in the rubble underneath the laundry mat or something, I don't know. She was trapped underneath rubble. She felt a hand grabbing her from below. And I feel like this is less of the same type of manifestation, but it is a repeated pattern and a nice repeated horror. And I'm not saying that it means anything, because that was buried, but it's definitely the same idea that I like, that it came back here, of like a hand reaching out from below to grab you. That's very fun. Collector David Collins. So he is the scene of crime officer 98549. He is also the collector in episode 29, Keyed In. David. So in 29, the key that opens anything was in the Cheshire PD. And in my video for that, I had mentioned that I had thought that the key was in the Cheshire PD. But it seems like it is being transferred from the Cheshire PD to this Northwest long-term evidence storage, and sent there by David Collins. And so that's interesting to note, because that's exactly what happens in this episode. This PDF was sent by David Collins to the Northwest long-term evidence storage. Now, I was just following a whim, and I was like, what happens if I just look up Northwest England, the Northwest UK, right? And I did. And I don't know what this means, but the Northwest England area encompasses many different locations, including Greater Manchester area, which Manchester was the location of the now burnt down Magnus Institute. I think this feels like a coincidence, but I cannot do my due diligence and not mention, hey, the Northwest long-term evidence storage is in the same general area as the Magnus Institute, where it was burned. David Collins, I'm onto you. I don't know what this means. We haven't had a name like this repeated within like the information of, because there's been a handful of episodes with like collections or like officers mentioned, just random names thrown out there. And I feel like this guy, David Collins, appeared again. And especially, I also like how it's all in French in this episode, so it feels like they're trying to hide something here from us. I don't want to think that the name is just random and accidentally the same name, because as we know from archives, all the names have to be paid attention to. I've written down all of the names that have been mentioned. And this is a repeat of that. And so I want to pay attention to David Collins if he appears later, specifically because Manchester feels like a coincidence, but I have to keep note of that. Also, I would say that the long-term evidence storage assumes that the investigation is either closed or they just simply stopped investigating. So, for example, the key, the woman opened up her chest. Collins probably was like, yeah, she's dead. Supernatural stuff. Let's just send it away so that no one really pays attention to it anymore. Same thing with Primrose Everdeen here. So David Collins probably knows what has been happening knows about the supernatural, and he's, I wouldn't say hiding it, but definitely keeping it in somewhere central location. Pietro died. The two producers and the pianist died. I'm keeping track of people who died. The Soko assumes, so scene of crime officer assumes that they were at a scene of death, which implies that Diva killed Primrose Everdeen, and it's evidence that Primrose Everdeen was killed by a Diva. So, yay! Whom is Gwen meeting? Gwen, who are you meeting with? With whom? Is that the correct grammar? I'm really tired right now. Gwen is probably meeting with, I don't know, Starkwell maybe? Is Brett Lars going to come back? I miss you, Brett Lars. You haven't come back to me since episode 36, right? 33? I miss you, Brett Lars. 33. It's definitely 33. So last episode, I had a little frustration because Sam had questioned and was like, the eye thing is weird with Archivist. And I was kind of annoyed because I was like, how does he not know about the eye thing? Because a lot of the time, things about the Archivist has been mentioned in tandem with eyes. He might have mentioned how being touched by the Archivist created eyes on his arm, but I feel like the wording there is a little too vague, but he's like, still is like, the eye thing is new with Archivist, which is not. It's not new. It's been about eyes the entire. So I've been a little frustrated with the lack of communication with the characters, and it feels less like a flaw, but more of like the make the plot work, And so when Oscar Jarrett name come in, and Alice is like, "Who is that?" And then Celia is like, "Who is that?" I had to track when Oscar Jarrett appeared, who may have heard about it. And so in episode 11, marked, Sam and Alice both listened to the statement. However, Sam's not here, he's gone. And Alice is understandable that she would not have paid attention. She frequently talks about not paying attention. So that's understandable that she would not remember Oscar Jarrett. I'm giving some leeway to there. That is the type of, that she is the kind of character to not remember, to not pay attention to that. And the only other person who would fully know about Oscar Jarrett is Gwen, who took the statement from Ing 5 They told her about getting inspiration and getting power from Oscar Jarrett. And so Celia wanting to tell Gwen, hey, Oscar Jarrett would do something. But Gwen is too self-centered to care about Celia, to listen. And so that is really fun. That's a lot more fun than I thought about. I was thinking, there has to be someone who has heard about Oscar Jarrett, but Alice would not. Sam, definitely, but he's gone. And Gwen is the person who would connect dot. And so that's really fun. It's exciting to see what Gwen will do after the fact. And so the thing that is nagging me a little bit is that there has been a pattern established. It's not a full pattern, and I want to say this always happens, but it feels like this would have been continued in this episode, but it wasn't. So this pattern, episode 38, circling back, Alice names Heinrich Unheimlich, right? She hears a name from the investigation about Colin. She says it out loud in the cameras, in the videos, by Freddie. And Freddie reads out a statement, a journal entry about Heinrich Unheimlich. Freddie hears, listens, plays something, right? A little earlier, 19, hard reset. Sam talks about alchemy. This time he talks about it with Gwen in the break room. But obviously Freddie is listening. He talks about her in the break room. And when he returns to his desk, Freddie plays a case of alchemy and Isaac Newton. And after that, Sam is like, hey, Alice, I think Freddie's listening to us. So yeah, those two episodes, there has been other moments where Freddie has sort of listened to what's been happening and played something relevant to what the characters are talking about. And here, that felt like something was going to happen, especially now that Freddie is doing more and more stuff. Alice learns about Oscar Jarrett from Heinrich Unheimlich. Alice tells Celia about Oscar Jarrett. Celia, talking to Alice out loud while she's being recorded by Freddie, asks, who is Oscar Jarrett? And Freddie, I would expect, plays a case about Oscar Jarrett. Instead, we got Diva and Primrose Everdeen, which I really like this case, but that expectation was set up and it was not delivered. But I feel like I said, I think this was more of a me thing. Like, I would have wanted this pattern, and maybe it's not always like this. Like, has been episodes where I'm like, why is this case here? Why is this important? And some critiques that some people have had, that I do too, is like, these cases kind of feel like background thing. Like, it's not the main important thing of this story, unlike Archives, where the statements were the big thing of the story. And so, to me, I was like, this could have been even better if Oscar Jarrett's case was read out. A case giving more information about Oscar Jarrett would have been read out by Freddie after Celia asks out loud, "Who's Oscar Jarrett?" But, like I said, I really like this case. And also, that doesn't mean that's not going to happen yet. This is only episode 43. There might be an Oscar Jarrett case later. I will pay attention to that, obviously. And if another Oscar Jarrett, if Freddie plays an Oscar Jarrett case later in next episode, in 2 episodes, or something, for Gwen, for Celia, that would be good. That'd be fun. That'd be nice. Maybe since Oscar Jarrett is like Victorian, I think, times, it'd be Augustus returning, which we have not heard Augustus being voicing statements since 27 Driven. So I would like that. I would like to see that. But yeah, overall, amazing episode. I really like this episode. I think this is my favorite of season 2 so far. I have to look at it, but this was a really good episode for season 2, and so I'm really excited for the next. If this starts a really good train of really good episodes, love that. Anyways, I will see you for the next episode, episode 44. Don't know the name yet. We'll see you there. Hi. Sorry. I was just recovering from this episode because I died. So I debated whether I changed any of the information that I gave for the last episode, episode 43, because of the information I learned here. Decided to just keep it as is, keep it authentic to what I knew back then, and keep it authentic to what I know now. I might as well just continue forward. Moving forward, there will be some small information changes. Nothing too big, thankfully. But thankfully, we got confirmation for a lot. And listen, I was riding my bike, as I usually do when I listen to these episodes. That's how I get my exercise. That's how I stay skinty queen. And I was hearing the things that happened in this episode. And I was riding my bike and I started yelling. I was yelling out as I was riding my bike. Thankfully, there's no one outside in the park that I was riding in. But I was yelling, yes, yes, oh, yes. And then I had to get home quickly. And I was maybe halfway through my route. And so I had to bike the rest of the way as well. And I tried to do it as quickly as I could with the energy that I had, which means my legs are killing me right now. We have a lot to talk about here. Episode 44, Back to Basic. CAT3 RAC 2175- the dates. The description is prescience, parentheses, computing, -- equilibrium. CAT1 is a catalyst. It is Klaus's code. Rank AC. And the DPHW, death 2, pain 1, helplessness 7, wrongness 5. The date of the event happened March 26, 1987, and the date of the assessment is June 12, 2024. The author of this episode is Alexander J. Newell. The error date was July 24th, 2025. Brief summary: Klaus code predicts death and dread. Entities end with small elements of flesh and desolation. In scene 1, we are in a coffee house and Heinrich is complaining about people on their phones. Alice is distracted. She practically says, "Okay, boomer." And they were waiting for a 70-year-old. Heinrich says that he's a little uncomfortable in this moment. I assume he's just uncomfortable being in this location. He's not used to it. Alice says he didn't have to come with her. He couldn't have stayed, and he says that he's here to protect her. She's like, "Well, she's 70. What am I have to protect from?" Heinrich brings up that he's old, and she says that he's special. And he says that he and Stasi are very similar, except he at least spared the children, which is true. The Stasi likely did not. Government agents. And then a woman comes into the coffee shop and speaks briefly with Heinrich in German. And this is Clara Vogel, who is ex-Stasi. Her voice actress is Claudia Woodhouse. And she asks Alice how she found her. And Alice says that her name was found in files by Heinrich. But Heinrich translates what Alice says, and Alice thinks, I thought that Heinrich translated what Alice said, but in reality, in German, he says, we could smell your sins. Clara used to be one of Heinrich's children. As you remember from episode 41, Public Image, Heinrich endeared himself to some children, and they spread Heinrich's story and spread the fear for Heinrich. And so Clara was one of these children. And she asks Alice, who are you to be walking around with Heinrich? And Alice introduces herself. She's from the OIAR, and she asks about Klaus Schweitzer. She doesn't know where he is, but if Clara knew where Klaus was, she would kill him. And Alice asks, what did he do? She does not want to answer that question. And Alice is exasperated at this point. She was like, I was going to bribe you, but now I'm not going to do that. So tell me what he did. I'm going to tell everyone in here that you're ex-Stasi. And she's like, okay, and they're just going to kill an old lady. That's not going to affect me. Try again. And Heinrich instead threatens her and begins this long, poetic German demonic tale that translated is just him talking about how Clara used to terrorize children when she was younger and how she became part of his children. It's a little vague, ambiguous about what happened to Clara, but that's not important. The important part is she is terrified of Heinrich. And so she begins to talk about Klaus, and we get Clara's statement about Klaus Schweitzer's code. While she was working with the Stasi, they were watching squatters, and in that group of squatters, she saw Klaus, and he was covered in tattoos, and she notes that it was similar to a grandmother who had folk beliefs, implying obviously that his tattoos were archaic in some way. She was chosen to give him an offer to work for the Stasi because she was hot, and she could definitely get him to say yes for anything. And so either work for the Stasi or join with your squatter pals in jail. So he decides to work for the Stasi for Clara. This fun, not so fun moment, Clara says that Klaus both feared her and wanted her. And all throughout the story, there's implications that she did sexual things with Klaus, but it's never outwardly stated, which I am fine with not being outrightly stated because some of the triggers in this episode is implied sexual coercion. And so it's all just implication more than anything. Clara says that her superiors wanted a program that would track the fears of their targets to predict disorder and disloyalty before they committed a crime. They were trying to do thought crime. That's it, thought crime. So Klaus really liked this idea for a code and began working on it and always was asking for a lot of data. What data, Clara does not specify. I would like to know what kind of data you were collecting, what kind of things you were giving him, but it is what it is. And throughout it all, Clara basically tortures Klaus to get him to work, to get him motivated. Klaus's work tended to fail, but the things that he did in the failure, the code that he created, Clara says was wonderful. And don't exactly know what that means. I'm assuming that it did something different than what they wanted, but it was still helpful. But it was not exactly what they needed. And at some point, Clara traps him in a room for 2 weeks with provisions for only 1 week and tells him to do code. When she pulled him out of that isolated location, she said that the code sang for her. It was just gibberish with symbols carved into the walls, into the keyboard, and his own skin. And it seems like he drew from Oscar Jarrett pictures, because we knew that he collected pictures from Oscar Jarrett's tattoos. And so when he finished, after those 2 weeks, the computers would print out a list of names with dates and times on them, and Clara would investigate. The first name on the list was Karen Mueller, who was very recently going to be arrested for insider trading, I believe. And she had that date and the time on the list when she was supposed to be arrested. And Clara was there when they arrested her. However, she was never arrested because somehow her hand got into the meat grinder, and died from that. Why was there a meat grinder there? That's terrifying. And then the next person Clara investigated was Matthias, who she knew from university. And she found him placing an electrical cable in his mouth. And when investigating, she discovered that he was following special orders from a supervisor who never existed. Clara investigates all the names, and all of those names died on the dates and times listed. And this was not what the superiors asked for, but she knew that they could use what he created. And so she goes back to the place where he was to get all of his stuff to bring it to her superiors. And Klaus is gone. He disappeared. He took all of the computers, took all of his work, left just his filth, she says, and an envelope. Clara knows that this envelope has her name, her date, and her time when she will die. And she does not know if this is a gift or torture from Klaus. There was an interesting writing decision I liked, where at the very beginning she says that Klaus could not eat, could not sleep, could not breathe without asking if Clara okayed it. And then here, when she finds the envelope, she says that she cannot eat, she cannot sleep, she cannot breathe without thinking about Klaus. And so great parallel moments there. She knew that while Klaus loved her, Klaus loved his program more. She never saw him again, but at least he's not in Germany. She would have found him if he was. Alice asks for the address where he was kept, and Clara writes it down, gives it to her, and Alice says that she can go. And Clara turns to Heinrich and in German asks if she opens the letter, would it be for today? And Heinrich says, let's find out. And she leaves abruptly, and Alice discovers that she left the envelope, and Heinrich says that he's going to return it to her later on. Scene 2. Gwen is in Lena's house. I don't know why I didn't think about it, but last episode, last clip, I questioned where Gwen was going to go because she was leaving it. She was like, hey, there's this thing here. And I didn't know who the meeting was with. I thought it was with Brett Lars. It completely flew out of my head that Lena had agreed to meet with Gwen at some time, and so this is her meeting the next day. She's in her house. She has really bad small talk. And she does say that she is glad that Lena is well because Gwen was afraid Lena was disappeared. She had no record. She found no record of Lena anywhere in the OIAR. And Lena says that she intended for that. She made it so, expensively so. And Lena says she's happy to stay obscure. And there's some back and forth, and eventually Lena asks, what does Gwen want? And Gwen says she doesn't know what to do here as the manager of the OIAR. Lena seems to not want to answer. She gives her half-truths and doesn't really want to answer her. And Gwen is like, all right, this was a waste of time. I'm leaving. And she gets up to leave, and Lena tells her something that stops her in her tracks. Now, this is very, very, very important. Dread is organized into 4 key elements: death, pain, helplessness, wrongness. It is essential that these 4 elements remain balanced. That is the purpose of the OIAR. This was when I was riding my bike and I started screaming. She says dread. And I start, ah! And she keeps going. And then she says the DPHW. And I'm like, ah! Ah! I'm riding my bike. My legs are hurting. I am sweating. Oh, and this was such a amazing drop. It just came out of nowhere, basically. But I knew that it was coming. And this is just confirmation. This is just confirmation as to what we already knew. Lena says about the 4 elements, too little of one element needs more of it, and too much of one element needs to be balanced out by increasing another element. Freddy monitors those levels and recommends interventions, and bad things will happen if there is failure to maintain balance. Gwen does note that this system will only generate more dread over time and asks if Lena ever sought out to reduce dread. Lena says that the response department used to try to reduce dread, but eventually they found out that externals were much more reliable. Gwen sort of questions, like, why is all this like this? Lena doesn't know why. It just is. Gwen needs to keep things balanced before anyone is hurt, Lena tells her. And there's a moment where Gwen sort of, I guess, makes a face. And Lena correctly guesses that there's already been something bad happen, something occurring, aka Colin's dead, Sam's gone, Alice is in Germany. But when Gwen's about to say something, she doesn't want to hear it. She does not want details. I guess to separate herself from all that, you know. Then Gwen asks what the protocol is, and Lena questions where she heard that from, but Gwen doesn't respond. Eventually, Lena says that the protocol is the last resort for keeping all of this secret. It's impossible to properly operate in the OIR if all of this is transparent to the general public. If something or someone is about to reveal things, the protocol is enacted. And so she says the protocol is isolate, gather, control, excise, and subvert. Gwen says, can you please give me some concrete answers? And I'm like, is that not concrete enough? Can you not take those words and understand what they mean? But Lena explains a little bit further. It's just, quarantine, get all the stuff, information, pull the stuff that is needed and important, burn the rest, and then blame someone else, subvert, which I think is a little fun. Lena tells Gwen to keep everything balanced, even if people die. Gwen thanks her and is about to leave, and Lena tells her that she does not want to be contacted again. She says that not many people get out unscathed, and she wants it to stay like that. Gwen leaves, and the episode ends. Notes. Okay. There's some connection between Oscar Jarrett's work and Klaus that I'm missing. Because to me, I could totally understand. I can see, Smirks 14, Robert Smirk, architect, laid out the basis for all of this, right? Get that. Oscar Jarrett, to me, tattooing doesn't really match the level of scale that Robert Smirk does. So I'm not sure if they're trying to make an Oscar Jarrett like a Robert Smirk. I don't think they are, but there's definitely some disconnect in terms of his tattooing and Klaus's interest and the eventual organization. I'm not sure. There's something missing here for me. About the code and the entities, the code that Klaus programs is very, very similar, or at least the treatment in the episode and in the statement is very similar to episode 70, Book of the Dead, which is all about the end. If you remember, it's about a book that tells you when you're going to die in horrible ways, exactly when and where. And this is exactly what happens here, except it's less of detailed and more just like, it's this time and this date. That's it. And so that, to me, also Clara's fear, Clara's dread about the envelope feels very end to me. Mueller's death by a meat grinder, that's flesh. I mean, meat grinder, come on. And then Matthias's death is a little ambiguous, electrical cable and a supervisor who doesn't exist. That to me says that's desolation. Electrical cable in your mouth, that's gotta hurt, This episode, this statement draws from imagery of and ideas from 65 binary with Sergei Yushenka eating the keyboard and the glass, and 123 Web Development, where Annabelle Kane hires someone to make the Chalicery website that starts everything with the Magnus archives, because Chalicery website, Carlos Vittori, Jane Prentice, etc. But I will say none of those two episodes are connected to this. It's similar motifs, similar patterns seen in two different worlds. But it would be really interesting. So if Annabelle Kane created the Chalicery website, or hired someone to create the Chalicery website, who's to say that she did not also hire somebody to hire Klaus to make this program? This is how Annabelle Kane can still win. Real quickly, Kara's childhood. The writing, like I said, was a little hard for me to understand. Not because the translated version. It's kind of hard for me to understand. I can tell that she scared children. It seemed like the children would tell stories about Heinrich Unheimlich stopping her. Not fully sure. But in the end, it does feel like she is both a victim and an accomplice to Heinrich Unheimlich. And Heinrich is definitely going to kill Clara after this. He's gonna deliver the letter to her, and they open it, and it's that date, that time, and he's gonna kill her. Likely, maybe, that'd be fun. That'd be terrifying for her. Personally, I'm not sure why Alice wants the address to where Klaus was kept. I don't feel like there would be anything there. But at least that's a lead. Maybe neighbors would say something, or I'm not fully sure why she wants the address, but at least it's something to move forward. So yeah, like I said, confirmation. This is all confirmation of things that we already knew as a collective, all gathered together, what we found out. The Dread has 4 parameters. There is no categories. There is no labels. These are parameters. These are elements. The Dread elements. Death, pain, helplessness, DPH, and then W. So when I learned about this through Reddit, through Tumblr, through other people in the fandom learning about trying to decipher what DPHW means, the ARG, which has information about the programs, other people that actually did stuff with it, know a lot more about the ARG than I do. But in it, the DPHW, which is in German, is TSHU, and people connected those letters to the words. I think like death in German starts with a T. I don't remember. It's been proving pretty well, and it's been proven right now at least. People thought that I thought that U was Unheimlich. That fits, and Unheimlich translates to weird, which is why I had the DPHW as weird. However, wrongness, as Lena puts it, which is, I would say, a synonym for weird, in German is also translated to Unrecht, which is also a U letter. So that still fits with the German DPHW and fits with the English DPHW. So moving forward, I will be now doing wrongness instead of weird. I will say, wrongness does not fit very well in my mouth like weird does. But hey, that's just the wrongness of wrongness. And I do feel like wrongness is a better... I did feel like weird didn't really fit that. I felt like weird was a miscellaneous idea, but wrongness definitely fits connotatively with death, pain, and helplessness. So we now know for at least one aspect of the organization in the OIR. We don't know for sure exactly what the CAT 123s are, besides what we've theorized so far. I don't know what the ranks are. Have not seen anything any theorization that I like or fits. And so that's still up in the air. Confirmation of CAT is needed. Explanation of ranks are needed. But at least we have confirmation of the DPHW, which is the most variable thing that we are presented with. Because CAT 123 is always going to be 123, and then ranks are going to be A, B, C, A, B, BC, AC, S. Those a little bit more variable, but not as much as the 4 parameters with 9 different integers. That varied a lot, and so at least we got full confirmation that that is the death, pain, helplessness, and weird. And also, it's levels that need to be adjusted. And so my thought was, okay, we have this organization. How does alchemy fit in this? Because obviously, this organization is based off of some information in the past. Is alchemy in this somehow? I didn't really know. Between writing notes and getting ready to film, on Tumblr, I posted about the episode, obviously. Oh, and follow my Tumblr. I'll link it in the description below. I'll be theory posting there a lot, or reacting as well. But yes, on Tumblr, I saw someone commented on one of my posts, My Life the Rant, Tumblr user My Life the Rant, pointed out about the 4 humors that is used a lot in alchemy, and those 4 humors being black bile, yellow bile, phlegm, and blood. And so that is definitely something to consider. That has not been brought up in protocol, but it is definitely something that is in the general zeitgeist of alchemy. And I think that the 4 parameters of DPHW is not specifically connected to black bile, yellow bile, phlegm, and blood. I'm not saying that like phlegm is connected to helplessness. No. But definitely, I think that the people in the protocol universe probably use the framework of understanding the 4 humors to make sense of the dread elements. So, having these 4 humors, we have to balance them out so a human can be healthy, ? Hey, that sounds very similar to what we've observed from the dread elements. Let's make these parameters like that. Let's balance out these levels and stuff like that. So that makes a lot more sense than it just being like, hey, black bile, that is death. This was a question, I think it answered it here. There is that moment in episode 10 Saturday Night where Gwen has to deliver an envelope to Bonzo that sends him to kill somebody. What is in that name? What is in that envelope? And in the envelope is that name, likely, that Freddy printed out. And so the question I had when I was writing notes, how does Freddy think of these names? How does Freddy generate these names? And it's answered in this statement. Freddy, the Klaus's code, prints out the name of someone and the time and date that they should die. And so maybe after that, it was adjusted a little bit to be like, who would be the best to generate these parameters from and which external to use, et cetera, et cetera. And so Freddy is doing all those decisions. How is the question? It's less important, but it's still a question like, how is Freddy generating all of this? What data is being used? How is Freddy monitoring this? All of that is not as important because we know that it just is. The protocol, if you remember, it was first introduced in episode 19, Hard Reset, where Boyle wrote to Boyle, there's 2 Boyles, about Isaac Newton being, they're bullying Isaac Newton. And they talk about using the protocol to destroy his notes. And then episode 20, Social Stigma, Sam tells Alice and Celia that he was given some documents in an random email, probably given by Freddy, that the Magnus Institute was destroyed by the protocol, by the OIR and GSR security, or how we know them today as Starkwell. And so we knew all that. We knew that the protocol, this is just confirmation, hey, the protocol is to destroy, to make sure nothing gets out. And lastly, these are discombobulated thoughts that I'm trying to coalesce into something coherent. The response department, ? Sam was filling out papers for the response department. Lena said that the response department was no longer alive, it's defunct. In episode 20, Sam says that the response department was run by William Price. In 35 Terms and Conditions, Gwen asks Alice who William Price is, and they start talking about it, which is like, hey, this is another part that I discovered, like, hey, Sam talked about William Price to Celia and Alice. And then we return to William Price in this episode. And they're like, I don't know who that is. Pay attention. Pay attention. It's less. I can excuse them forgetting Sam saying William Price. But still, like, hey, you guys did hear this before. Anyways, Gwen said that Lena was contacting with William Price about balancing the books. And so it's sort of implied that the response department, or I guess William Price, is the person who helped Lena with balancing the dread elements. And so there's this disconnected information that is just floating in nebulous that's like response department, William Price, Lena, current or past. And I don't know what it all means yet, obviously. But to me, William Price is the next question mark. You know, we already got Klaus. Klaus is a programmer. Probably going to get a little bit more about Klaus, maybe about how he got into the OIR, and that maybe explains a little bit more of the program and stuff like that. But definitely, like, William Price being part of the response department, being in contact with Lena, being mentioned in tandem with the protocol is definitely something also to keep track of. And so, yeah, that is it. Oh my god. Oh my god. My legs are killing me. This episode is killing me. I love the show so much. And I believe, next episode would be the midpoint of this show. Because there's 30 episodes every season. So there's 3 seasons, 90 episodes total. That means the midpoint is episode 45. So I will see you for the midpoint, episode 45. Who took my books? What this episode? Right. I didn't like it. I'm so sorry to say. It's not bad. I think it's this feels the most filler episode ever of Magnus Protocol. And I'm sad to say that I just did not really enjoy it that much. It felt fillery. It felt like it was fan servicey, and I didn't quite. There were some good moments in it, yes, but overall, I was like, this could have been the important good parts of this could have been used in a separate episode that did more. So I'm sorry. Episode 45, Transferal, CAT XXX. Again, whenever there is an episode set in the archives world, all of the information is just X'd out. And I feel like they need to make something different. Like if what they did in season 5 of Archives, where they had like the usual X's and then like numbers, that'd be fun. That showed like this is episode whatever number in the Archives world, but instead it's just X's. There's nothing to differentiate between episodes in when they're in Archives. I don't quite enjoy it. And it's not yet. I thought they were going to change it, but it's been this way for a long time. So I'm not. These are the stats. I'm not going to read them out because it's just the same thing. X's all around, non-applicables all around. It's written by Alexander J. Newell. Aired today, July 31st, 2025. A brief summary: Sam is dreaming. Celia's knowledge is revealed, and entities are the flesh. Nice and simple. In scene 1, Sam struggles in a dream. It is a nightmare. He calls out for Alice. Melanie barges in with a poker, asking if it's a nightmare or a monster. This part was pretty fun. And he says it was just a nightmare, so she like calms down. And he says that the dream felt very real. And Melanie realizes that he never had a domain, but when he describes it to Melanie, the dream feels like a domain dream. And Melanie thinks that Sam is getting this Sam PI. The transcript calls some like different characters PI. So like when Alice was there, it was PI Alice, just to set that this is not the same Alice from Protocol, but it's only in the transcript. Sometimes I may say PI. That just means that it is in Archives world. That's what I mean. Anyways, Melanie thinks that Sam is getting PI Sam's dreams. and asks if he wants to talk about it. And he says no. She leaves. She barges back in, and she says she left her poker because when he said it was a dream, she dropped the poker. She gets the poker in, and she's like, this is the last time if you want to talk, because Georgie and Basira are coming soon and they need breakfast and I need to start getting that ready. So I need to get my sleep. And he says, all right, fine, let's talk about it. And he describes the dream. And here, I didn't write any of my notes because I don't think it's substantial, but it was the first time that I fully realized the music, fully listened to the music, mostly because I was not connected to the text. And so I was like listening to the music, and I've heard before how the background changes when the statements start being recorded by the tape recorder. This is all with a tape recorder. I forgot to mention that. And there would be music in the back. This is the first time I realized this sounds at the very beginning when he starts talking about his statement, when he gives his statement. There's the music that you would normally hear, I would normally hear in Archives. And I need to look back at the last few episodes set in Archives world to see if the music is also similar. It's like, I don't know how to describe it. I'm not a musical kind of person, but it's like not a droning, but definitely like droning type music. It's not drone music, I know that, but it's subtle, you know. And in Protocol before, the music, Sam Jones, has been very bombastic. It's been interesting. It's been doing new things and interesting things to punctuate the horrors, and I really like it. In Archives, the music was very subtle at the very beginning, and it wasn't until like season 5 when they started doing fun things with the music, but in the beginning, the music was fun. It was just very, very subtle, very, very contained. And here, I heard that same type of music, I think. If you know more about the music of Magnus Archives, please let me know, because I think the music that was started playing at the beginning of his statement was that, and then it transitioned to something else, but I'll get to that in a second. Anyways, he starts his statement, scene 2. He's at Ackman Blaine. He goes into the stationery cupboard, the door closes, and he's trapped in there, and he can't move. He feels bone entombing him all around him. He's not afraid specifically, he's just confused and uncomfortable, but then the shell of bone begins to condense and shrink around him, and he feels extreme pain everywhere in his body. I think at this point is when the music switched from the usual, normal, subtle, archivesy and more into like, it sounded, the only thing I could do is like radio noises, like wavelength warbling is probably the right term, and it sounded like signals being sent. It's weird. I don't know. I like I said, I was paying attention to that more than the text, because the text was the text, and he still feels wrong. Like he's feeling all this pain. The pain feels wrong, not in the way that it should feel wrong, in terms of you should not feel pain, but in the way that this is not the pain for him. It feels like he's eavesdropping on someone else's suffering, and all of a sudden he could hear the voice of Alice in the distance calling out for her Sam, but not him. And the feeling of discomfort was that he could not be the Sam that she wanted to reach out for. And yeah, through it all, I just kept hearing like signal sounds, like warbling, radio waves bouncing off. I don't know how to explain that. Please, if you know more about this, please let me know, because I don't know what to make of it. In scene 2, Melanie and Sam are like, hey, it looks like you are stealing this world's Sam's dreams, even though he's dead. And Melanie remembers Georgie mentioning Alice was a dreamer, and so it would some interactions happening here where Sam is having the dreams that this world's Sam would have. And Sam asks Melanie, what kind of dreams do you have? How like real do they feel for you? And then he realizes, oh, that's a personal question. And she's like, well, I don't actually dream. Georgie and I don't dream. And then she goes on this long description, explanation, lore drop to Sam about how she basically just goes over everything that happened in Archives with her and Georgie's storylines of like, she recounts how she started Ghost Hunt UK. She saw Sarah Baldwin. She goes to the Magnus Institute, meets John. She mentions events of like season 3, dodging the end of the world a few times. Quits. He asks her, "Why didn't you quit beforehand?" And she said that the severance was really harsh. She avoids saying that she removed her eyes. I think more of a point of like, this is too personal than anything else. She also mentions about Georgie. She avoids mentioning that Georgie was it John's ex. I don't know if it's is, because John's no longer there. Grammar. And both of them were sort of free in the incursion. Not totally free, but they could go in and out of domains. And so that's big lore drop for Sam only. And Sam asks if he should tell Georgie about this dreams. And after some debate, Melanie agrees that yes, you should talk to Georgie about this because this is something new. In scene 4, Melanie and Sam are making breakfast for Georgie and Basira, and they're discussing Sam's dreams. Basira thinks that he's turning into an avatar, and Melanie points out that the Admiral, which is Georgie's cat, which we have not heard, I've had the question before, where is the Admiral? Where is Rosie Zampano? We got one of those. The Admiral! Melanie says that the Admiral liked Sam, so that's a good sign, because if Sam was a evil monster, the cat would not like him. And Melanie is confident that the archivist was not involved in these nightmares. Georgie says she's too tired, she doesn't quite know what to make of it. She turns over to Basira and lets Basira make a decision. Basira looks at Sam, he's like, I know what you are. No, she doesn't say that. She clears Sam, but says she's going to keep an eye on him just in case eyes pop out. And that's it. That's all good. Melanie asks about the wardens, to Georgie, like, how's your day been, basically? And what other new things have popped up. Georgie says there have been no new bodies. No people have been killed by the archivist, which is good, but also there has been no sign of the archivist at all. Basira says she could handle it if she had 3 good teams and she could get it done in a day or 2. But Georgie says she does not have the personnel to spare. After this, Melanie asks Sam how his OIRs would handle it. He corrects it's OIAR. OIRs, I love that. And he says that, well, they mucked it up the first time, so there's don't take advice from us. And they ask, like, well, it seems like you were like Team B or something. Like, what's Team A? And he's like, maybe Starkwell, but I never really met them, and also they sound like bad news. So they're like, okay, great, no Starkwell. And yeah, so there was no like Team B, Team A, or whatever. It was just them working in the office, and there was nothing to protect them, nothing to stop things. There was no response team. And he says, once he and Celia were in Hilltop, it was just them two doing this stuff. And Melanie sort of stops. This was fun part. Melanie sort of stops, and she's like, what did you say? Basira is confused. And Georgie realizes, Melanie turns to, did he just say Celia? And Georgie realizes that he had mentioned Celia, which he did. I specifically remember hearing him say Celia to Georgie, not Basira, sorry. I get names so mixed up. I remember specifically him saying the name Celia to Georgie, and she didn't react to anything there. And I was like, Georgie, hello? But she says, I heard the name, but I didn't really register it, and I was going to follow up, but it was just a rush of it all made me forget. Which, you know what? Yeah, that could happen 100%, and I believe that. And it sucks that we had to wait a bit for that. But absolutely, yeah. Obviously, with everything that's happening around, just the one name could have slipped through the cracks, under the door. So that's fine. Melanie turns to Sam and asks, what does Celia look like? Sam at first is like, she's pretty. Okay, what are you, 12? I'm sorry I'm bullying Sam so much here. He's like, she's tall and has dark hair. And Melanie asks, does she have a Welsh accent? And he says, yes. How did you? I never told you that. Georgie asks Sam where she came from, and he says she was a very private person, but when he was right before the rift, she told him dot dot dot. Oh, he realizes. And they say to Basira, who's still confused, that she was one of the people that they pulled from her domains. Basira asks, is she the one with no memories? And Georgie says that they lost track of her during a tower fall. And so Sam realizes that Celia knew where the rift led, and she didn't know that tower fall had occurred, so she still thinks that the archives is in the London incursion. Hell domains. She still thinks that that's happening. And he's a little angry, and he says that he wants to make sure this archivist stuff is all finished and figure it out, and so that he can have a talk with Celia. And the episode ends. Notes. There is not much here. This is part of the, there are some interesting things that can be pulled, but those are very small and very quick. I will say the Admiral is a reveal that could have happened any other time, but just that it happened here is fine. But the reveal of Celia's name to Georgie Melanie Basira happening here could have happened in the last episode that they were talking, and it would not really have changed much of the ending of that episode, because at the end of the episode it ended with a joke, and that was a good joke. What episode was it? 42 Hostile Workplace. Sam's talking about his skeleton phobia, and at the very end they're like, hey, the archivist is still out there, and we should deal with that. Yeah, even at the end of it, they're like, we need to deal with that. We need to group up and start working towards that. We all four need to get ready to face this mess. Sam cannot get a gun. That's what I have written in my notes. And it could have been easily that Melanie turns to Sam and is like, hey, how would the OIR have handled this? And he says, not really. We didn't have anyone. Maybe Starkwall. It was just Alice and Celia and Gwen and I. And they're like, who's Celia? And then it would have had the same conversation, and then it would have been the same thing. And this episode could have been used for something else. I'm sorry. I'm a little frustrated by that. Oh, also, I remember her. So, obviously, Celia name revealed to Melanie Georgia Basira. That's interesting and good to note because of the conversations that are happening after that. Specifically because, does Celia know? However, the other name that needs to be brought up is Gwen Bouchard. That needs to be brought up. I don't know how that would be brought up organically, but that would be really fun. That's what I'm excited for. But anyways. And so yeah, like the Admiral reveal and the Celia reveal are probably the biggest things here, besides the general idea that something is also happening. So the title Transferal is significant for a reason, obviously, because there is something happening with Sam getting P.I. Sam's dreams. Now, I don't know what that means. I feel like that is simply just a consequence of being here for a long time, but it could be that Sam is being acclimated to this location, so he's sort of fitting into the spot of P.I. Sam, which I don't think is going to do much of anything for the plot itself. I think it's just an interesting reaction to the things that are happening, balance and everything like that. And maybe Celia in Protocol world will be able to start feeling something different because she's now stable in the Protocol world, and Sam's now stable here. I don't know. The title, the dream, the fact that he's having the same types of dreams that P.I. Sam would have is interesting and distinctive, but I don't think it's a big plot thing. I think it's like consequences of actions and like sort of like just painting the world a little bit more. But I don't think it's a big thing yet. It might be, but I just don't think that. So the NT for this episode, Flesh. So the thing about this episode also is that it's very similar. The statement, one really small statement, which I think works works well, that it's really small, so it doesn't overstay its welcome. It's almost exactly the same as episode 39, Dependence, where P.I. Alice is telling Sam and Georgie about her dreams of being stuck in a flesh domain where her body is not her body, and she's having body dysmorphia. And that real fun horror, real fun imagery, real fun descriptions. Here, similar-ish descriptions, some newer ones in there in the writing, but overall, it's the same thing. So I don't feel horror. I'm not scared. Some of the descriptions are really interesting, but overall, it wasn't as scary as it could have been because this simply is just a rehash of what happened in episode 39. And so yeah, I think that this episode could have been more. This could have been used in a better way. Maybe if we wanted to keep the episode as is, move it to an earlier position, right? Because not only is it somewhat of a filler episode, it's also coming right off of a really good episode of 44 Back to Basic. The last episode was really, really good. And also, this episode 45, this is the midpoint of the entire show. And this is the midpoint. I think it would have been a lot better if we went diva story. Drowning. Opera diva. Love her diva. Diva, what did you do? Her story. Sam and his dreams. And then 45, Back to Basic. Midpoint of the episode, midpoint of the show, midpoint of the season, getting that DPHW reveal. That would have been, in my opinion, I think that's a better edit of this show. Whatever. It's coming off of a really good episode. It feels like a filler episode. It's a rehash of a former episode. There is a lot of fan servicey thing. There's not a lot of things revealed to the audience. It's mostly revealed to Sam. There's some good, funny moments, but overall, I just think this episode could have been reworked better. I'm sorry. And last on my notes, I will not accept any more Celia slander. Okay? Okay. Celia did not plan to take Sam to the rift. And here is some evidence. So, episode 29 keyed in, Celia finds Sam passed out from the archivist. She wakes him up, and Sam says he remembers the archivist trying to search for something in his memories, in his thoughts. And it was searching for something on the Magnus Institute, and Sam thought about Hilltop, and it focused in on that. And he believes that the archivist wants to go to Hilltop, and is like, we have to go to Hilltop to stop it. And Celia specifically says that, well, first she tries to stop him, and he pleads to her to go. And then she says it's a bad idea to go to Hilltop. And then episode 30, Dead End Job. Granted, at this moment, Celia is still curious about what's at Hilltop, and Sam at this point is a little less sure that the archivist wanted to go to Hilltop. He's less sure of this endeavor, but they both want to continue, and they both want to investigate what's at Hilltop because a lot of the things have been focusing on Hilltop. And at the Rift, Celia explains what the Rift is, what she believes it is. She's been researching about alchemy and balance because it's being pulling her towards it. It wants to bring her back to Archives world, and she needs to stay there for Jack. She also does not want to return to the hellscape that's there. And she probably did think of taking another person, pushing them in there to balance it out. But she would never actually do that because she's kind. And she did not want to do that. And then Sam is like, why did you take me here? And she says, it was your idea. And he says, was it? And then what? What? Sam? So Sam just jumps to conclusions and thinks that she wants to leave him there, that she let him there. And I don't think that's right. I think her mind, she thought of it and thought that's a possibility. That's an easy way out, but she does not want the easy way out. But then the archivist attacks, and it just happens that the archivist attacks Sam and they tumble into the rift. But she did not take him there. He insisted on going. She did not want to go. She wanted to stop him. He pleaded, and she was like, all right, fine. And then once they were there, they're like, let's both investigate because we're both been investigating. And so That, to me, does not say that she planned to take him there. Yes, she did obscure the information. Yes, she did not tell him why she's investigating about alchemy, about balance. She was reticent to tell him about things, but she did not want to push Sam there. I'm staking my claim there, okay? I will not take any more Celia slander. She did not want to do that. And I feel like the story is like, I think the story knows it, and Sam is jumping to conclusions. But I'm really scared because if it really was that Celia did plan to do that, then the text itself does not support that motivation. So, yeah. This episode, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that I'm being pretty negative here, but I just did not quite enjoy it. And especially coming off of last two episodes, really good episodes. This is just such a filler, fan servicey episode. I'm so sorry. Absolutely. If you like this episode, please let me know why, because I did not quite enjoy it. I hope that next episode is better, and I hope that they change up the descriptions of these episodes of when Sam's in Archives World, because it's kind of boring that they don't change it. I'm so sorry. I hate being negative on this channel. I don't like to be negative, but I have to critique and I have to be true to what I'm feeling about these episodes. Anyways, this is Luna. This is Darian. And this is Chase. And I have a jellyfish on the back of my shirt. Do you see that? Alright, I'll see you for next episode. Hey, so I moved. I'm just filming in the random corner in my house until I figure out my filming setup. So, yeah, blank wall here. This is where I'm going to put the cork board. No, I'm just kidding. Real excited for this episode. There's a lot here, and I was going to say that there's a lot that we can pull from this episode, but there isn't that much. But it's pretty illuminating for some things that we've seen in the past, so I'm really happy about that. Episode 46, Slipping. CAT1RBC5257- the dates. The description is reanimation parentheses variable dash slash dash purpose. CAT1 is an agent. That agent is going to be Adam, and it is rank BC. The DPHW, death 5, pain 2, helplessness 5, wrongness 7. The date of the incident is January 13th, 2024, and the date of the assessment is June 13th, 2024. The author of this episode is Jonathan Sims. The air date is August 7th, 2025. Brief summary: Alice is done investigating in Alric Capital, and the entities are various: Hunt, Flash, Stranger, and End. That's pretty variable. I'll talk about it. In scene 1, Alice and Heinrich are investigating the address that Clara gave them, the one where she kept Klaus trapped for like 2 weeks, I think it was. That one. And it's just an empty plot of land. And Alice is frustrated with the lack of answers, not being able to find Klaus, and she sort of thinks about, what now? What am I supposed to do now? She says, well, do I just go home now, or are you gonna kill me? As a joke to Heinrich, and then she's like actually kind of a little scared. Is like, are you going to kill me? And he's like, thank you so much for that little tinge of fear. No, I'm just gonna go home, I guess. And he tells her that she needs to. Well, first she says that she's going to call Celia, and then he tells her that she needs to let her supervisor know about Dane. Yeah, y'all remember Dane? Because she was like, oh yeah, I forgot that Dane was killed by Heinrich. And she's like, do you know how much trouble I'm going to get in that because of that? He's like, I don't care. And so she's sort of despondent about not having any answers about Klaus. And he tells her, well, if the OIR has a version of Klaus's code, it's very likely that Klaus went to London. So it's somewhat likely that he's still there. And she's like, you know what? That's a great idea. Let's go home. And so Alice now has to return to London to see if she can find anything about Klaus. In scene 2, Celia is in the OIR at work, and she begins to fall asleep at her desk. Gwen sees her and wakes her up and scolds her for falling asleep at her desk. And Celia's like, I've just really been tired, not been able to sleep well. And Gwen is like, well, that doesn't stop others from not working bad. It's like, she's the only one who's there. So why are we antagonizing her? That's the only worker that you have right now. And Gwen asks if Celia has heard about Alice. When is she returning? Celia does not know when Alice is returning, but I guess between last scene and this scene, she called Celia, maybe. I'm not sure. Either way, Celia says that Alice sounded frustrated last time she communicated and probably does not have answers. And Gwen says, well, she'll get over it. She says that, sometimes the answers aren't that good anyways. And so there's a moment where Celia's like, do you have something? Do you want to say something? And Gwen asks Celia if she ever got what she wanted, but it made everything worse. And there's another beat. And Celia's like, yes. And they have like little moment connection there. And then Gwen's like, okay, I'm going to go, bye. And Celia's like, all right, gotcha. Real fun interaction between these two. And then Celia begins her casework and a case plays. In scene 3, Chester/John reads out a board of directors meeting minutes for Elric Capital. And it lists out the names of the people present. The CEO and the CFO names are redacted, but the members of the board are listed. Board of directors. Let me pull up the list of names. Jeffrey Malachi, Senior Vice President of Consulting. Zach Francis Allen, Senior Vice President of Human and Labor Resources. Ina Lake, International Consulting Representative. Iris Lee, Senior Vice President of Recruiting. I think she's online remotely. She and the next person are remotely. Mark Mitchell, Communications Specialist. And that's the board of directors. Those 5 people plus the 2 CFO, CEO that are unnamed, redacted. So in my notes, I have tried guessing if whenever redacted speaks, if it's the CEO or the CFO. I have in my notes that sometimes I might say the CEO or the CFO, but there's no really good way of guessing who says what. So I'm just going to say redacted at times as well. So CEO, CFO, redacted, same idea until we get further information. So at first there's approval minutes for a meeting on November 17th, 2023. I guess like the last meeting. I don't know why this is important here. And then there's some project updates. First, Ina Lake gives an update for Zora Trader. So there's been a wind down of the program. That is, the participants in a beta are being removed from their data information. They're wiping the system. And someone asks about the status of the programmer. She continues saying that all Zora trade operations are being shut down and Elric's liability is being reduced to 0. They're making sure that Elric is not going to be sued for anything. And then she says that the original programmer succumbed to a test in 2023 and that all non-hostile assets and liabilities were seized and or sold for 43 million USD, for which the redacted, probably the CFO, says that amount is insignificant. That's great. That's great. $43 million. Okay, that's insignificant. Iris Lee gives an update on the booth development, and she says that there has been minimal changes since the 2 years of initial investment. It's been 2 years since they started, and nothing has changed, basically. And she reads out a list of concerns and delays from Bailey and Chavez, the 2 people running it. And she lists out like the first 2 concerns, and the rest of the team is like, I don't want to hear this anymore, so it stops. We move on. Zach Francis Allen gives an update on specialist investments, I guess. He says there are 7 active, down from 9 at the end of the year, and he's asked why. And he gives an update of two of the specialist investments. One is W. Leibowitz, aka Teeth, who was killed in Glasgow before Christmas, and an investment management team has limited Elric's liability, basically cleaning up after whatever happened in Glasgow. And G. Mears, aka Inside Out, quit sent a video, and they was like, let's watch the video, and he's like, let's not watch the video, and they're like, let's watch the video, and they watch the video, and they have to move meeting spots because people get sick. People get sick at watching this video, and at the end, uh, Alan wants to retaliate, and another person agrees, and they put out a motion. They're voting to see should we get this person killed, and the motion fails. They decide not to seek retaliation against G-Mears, aka Inside Out. Then the redacted reminds the meeting about an in-person demonstration by Dr. Augustine. He started an extractive grief service in 2020, and the funding by Elric Capital was ended in mid-2023, and the motion passed, and they summon Dr. Augustine. When he arrives in a different room with the available equipment that they need, that's never mentioned again, but they needed better equipment. And the person that is there is not Dr. Augustine. And various descriptions are given. It does slightly match the description of Dr. Augustine, but the skin doesn't sit right on this specialist. And the specialist calms a group and says he took enough parts from Dr. Augustine to gain admittance. And they ask, is Dr. Augustine dead? He says, yes, but Dr. Augustine did not have any connection to the Elric Capital Company, so it doesn't really matter if he's dead or not because I'm here, and he was not connected to y'all, so let's proceed. And redacted, I assume the CEO is like, that's right. He had no connections with us. He's not a business partner. So, new person, continue what you're showing/sharing, but my mouth did that instead. Oh well. So, the specialist introduces themselves as Adam, and they also had taken the names of Robert Blank, Michael Egan, Arthur Winstead, and Alistair Brown. And he was created by Dr. Augustine as part of experiments into grief redirection strategies. Lee is ignorant about the project, and so Redacted says that the investment was run by Richard Kent, who died in 2022. In fact, it says that he dropped it or something. He was pushed out because he died. So, let me find the word. I'm in my room, so my computer's over there, so I can just anyways, it says that he was forced to resign because he died. That's great. And so they look for the minutes from that meeting that was set up by Richard Kent, I assume, to become more familiar with what Dr. Augustine was doing. So Adam explains that his creation, he doesn't really know about it, but he does know that Dr. Augustine had imbued within him an instinctive need to convert himself into a facsimile of the dead using the available body parts. Dr. Augustine was his first attempt to extract necessary components while still alive, but it was too traumatic, so he ended up having just to kill Augustine to make it easier. Redacted tells Alan to follow up with Dr. Augustine's estate and any remaining family just to reduce the liability of Elric. And Lake asks why he wanted a meeting, and he says he's looking for a purpose as it was created by Elric. He's asked what Dr. Augustine had told Adam what he was to do, and Dr. Augustine had told him that he was a proof of concept for new grief support pathways. He was supposed to embody and replace the deceased for however long the client wanted and paid for. Redacted says the project was canceled because of failure of the creature, as it's referred to in Dr. Augustine's notes. Adam is referred to as the creature. The creature did not offer any comfort, only reliably intense terror. Adam gets angry and he asserts that he was created to love and to comfort, and that each cadaver imbued in him love for the client, and he is simply just a being of deep, warm feeling despite inspiring fear. And Malachi says that this is only because you were eating the bodies, so that's not even a thing within you. You gained all these emotions because of the bodies. And Adam has a little outburst, and there's a moment where Redact is like, okay, you need to calm down or else we're going to stop. And so he does. And so Redacted asks, what does Adam want? And Dr. Augustine got into a depression after Elric pulled their funding. And so Adam was trapped in his basement, in Dr. Augustine's basement after that for, what is it, 2, 3? No, it was 22, right? I think it's 2 years he was trapped in the basement. And Dr. Augustine was trying to destroy him, but could not do it somehow. And he began to heavily drink, and that led to mistakes that allowed for Adam to escape and eventually kill him, take the body parts. And Dr. Augustine used to talk about and blame Elric for Adam's creation, so maybe Adam thinks that going to Elric itself, he will find a purpose for himself. Redacted says Elric doesn't want him because it's not viable. And Adam gets a little bit more angry, and he's like, why did you only made me to suffer? And so they allow Adam to make his own business proposal. So they take another recess. Every once in a while in this format, they talk about meetings, they talk about voting, they talk about recess, and it feels very clinical and very business-like manner, despite what's being talked about, which is kind of fun. After the recess, Adam proposes that he wants to continue Dr. Augustine's work, and he gives a layout of exactly what he wants to do, which is find the bodies of the dead and make people happy. And Malachi asks what kind of returns are expected, and he very hesitantly says that they can get access to the monetary estates of the deceased, which brings up legal concerns, so that's shot down. And then other questions are presented to him, and he's very unsure about them. So at the very end, they have a motion for letting Adam continue Dr. Augustine's work, and the motion is defeated. And Adam gets very, very angry. He gets very violent, and security is called. And at the very end, Adam kills Malachi and 2 security officers before he's declared dead as well through 2 different times. So, in the meeting, they have Malachi's dead at this time. 2 security officers are confirmed dead at 2 different times. And then Adam is confirmed dead at 3 different times. And so it's assumed, I guess. It's implying that Malachi, coroner, he died at this time. The 2 security officers, they died. The coroner says they died at this time. And then Adam, died at 3 different times. Came back to life. Died. Came back to life. Died again. And that's it. And it says at the very end of the transcript, or it says at the very end of the notes, see coroner's notes. This is the second time that we've had a statement that's like, hey, you should go see the coroner's notes. I don't have them, so stop. It's a fun little implication there. And then they move the meeting again because there's this bunch of blood everywhere, and Lee motions to defer appointing a replacement for Malachi until the next meeting. And it passes. They're like, yeah, let's do that. Let's hold off for later. And the meeting ends at 11:46 a.m. It started at 10 something in the morning. That took an hour, almost 2 hours long. Wow. In scene 4, very short scene, Celia tries to categorize this statement. She pulls out the binder with all the DPH values. That hasn't been pulled out since early season 1. She pulls it out. She's trying to look for it. She can't find it. She does not care. She gives up, and she goes to sleep. And then scene 5, we're in her phone, and we hear the sounds of highway, and all of a sudden a truck blares its horn at her, and she wakes up and jumps out of the way, and the truck almost hit her, and she begins to despair. She's saying, no, because this is something we've seen before happen to her. And the truck driver gets out, and truck driver, voiced by Pip Gladwin, is like, are you okay? Do you need any help? And she's like, no, I'm sorry. And he's like, it's late at night. I could have hit you. It's so dark. What are you doing? And then she's like, how far is London? And the episode ends. Notes. Alice is going back to London. I knew that there wasn't anything in that plot. I said it. I'm pretty sure I said it. That she's not going to find anything in this plot. It's just another lead that is going to end up nowhere. I knew it. I knew it. I called it. Anyways, Celia and Gwen are getting on each other's nerves more and more. And that's, I don't know if it's going to get to anything, but it's definitely like, hey, things are ratcheting up and pressure for Celia, for Gwen, especially with Gwen learning more about the OIR. She still has a lot more to learn, but there's going to be a lot of tension coming. And Celia is really tired. Is she tired from like work? She's definitely being overworked because she's the only person there. She also has a baby, so that might also factor in. I have it as like, is it either work or Jack? But it might be both. But she's definitely very tired. And that little moment that Celia and Gwen had is Gwen learning about the DPHW, Dread, is analogous to Celia finally escaping the pull of the rift by having Sam balance her out at this point. Because she has been very like, she feels guilty that she had to send Sam to the what she thinks is still hell. She feels guilty about that, but she's now better, or she's now safe here, that she knows about, which we know this is incorrect. Case notes: Elric Capital. So the CEO and the CFO redacted. Those names are important. Those names, I want to say, I'm going to stay. I've been staking my claim, and I will continue to stake my claim. Elric Capital, run by Annabelle Kane. Annabelle Kane, avatar of the web. She survived somehow. She didn't. Well, we don't know what happened to her after the end of the season of the end of Magnus Archives. So Annabelle Kane could still be out there, and she could be the CEO. And if not, and if it's just some random white guy, that also tracks. And the CFO as well, the person who is financial officer, right? Yeah. Why is CFO redacted? I understand CEO. Why CFO? The other members, all new names. I checked and rechecked. None of those names are reoccurring. There are some names that have reoccurred, some things that have reoccurred. So let's get into that. Elric was first mentioned in 35 Terms and Conditions. It is represented by Alan Stolas, the Elric Rehabilitation Institute. He was there in the meeting for not prohibition. I'm so sorry. Probation. Probation meeting for Terrence Benke, Bonzo killer, Bonzo serial killer. He was there, and he was like, hey, let's bring Bonzo killer guy to our rehab center. And Bonzo killer guy says no. So at that point, Elric became an interesting name because it is the last name of the main characters in Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, which I saw right before this second season started because my boyfriend watched it and he was like, oh, I know a lot about alchemy because of this show. I'm like, do you? And so I watched and I'm like, so this is a very different type of alchemy, Matthew. So it's not the same. But concepts do reoccur, whatever. But yeah, Elric is the last name of Edward and Alphonse, the main characters of the Alchemy show. So that was definitely a name that drew a lot of attention. It is also really fun to note that Zora Trader, the app, appeared in 13 futures, right? So Darian Laurel was killed by an insect thing after destroying his life doing the personal projection short selling. That happened September 17th, 2023, and the programmer of that personal projection short selling was killed in 2023 as well. They say succumbed to a beta test, but it's like, well, look what happened to Darian. He succumbed, that means he died. So he was killed. Whether accidentally or on purpose, we're not sure. But that happened in 13 futures, and that's Zora Trader. So it's really fun because obviously since Elric was first mentioned, we're like, Elric probably has other things happening, and it's really fun that it's proven here that Zora Trader is part of Elric, which Elric was never mentioned in that episode. So really fun moment there. Also, important moment here is that they gained 43 million USD, and they say it's insignificant to this company. And so I think this is pushing a theme more and more further and further about capitalism are bad, and I love that, especially because hey, $43 million is insignificant to you. I hate you. The next time Elric was mentioned was in 36 Out of the Box. They were listed as the people who funded the Booth program run by Lila Bailey and Chris Chavez, who are mentioned in this episode. Bailey and Chavez, they're the list of excuses that they were given for not having anything from this venture. And this is also where Gregory, fake Gregory with no ear, is there as well. So yeah, that's the second time that Elric was mentioned, and here's a little confirmation that this is run by Elric. Elric is doing stuff. Furthermore, Elric has 7/9. It used to be 9, now it's 7. Externals/avatars/ now we have a third name for these powered individuals. They're specialist investments. Okay. And we get two of them. We get two descriptions. So Teeth was killed in Glasgow. I would love to hear an episode of when Teeth died in Glasgow, or at least something that Teeth did before. But I don't think it's necessary because it might demystify what Teeth is. I'm guessing just vibes. It's the Hunt. This is why I have the Hunt listed, because Teeth Hunt. I don't know. I'm guessing here. And what's the other guy? Inside Out. Hey, what does that mean? The video that they watched made them throw up. So that to me says something about the flesh. Inside Out, you know? And he's still alive. He's still out there. They didn't want to retaliate against him. He's still out there. And then there's another 7 other specialist investments that are not named. Hey, is Needles there? Is Needles there? When's Needles going to come back? So that's fun. So Elric has special investments that are just avatars/externals that do stuff for them. They're investing in this specialist to do something. Dr. Augustine, Adam, and their grief management project. First episode, first shift. There's two cases basically. The second one is the one that most people pay attention to, obviously, because it has connections, because it's the Magnus Institute and eyes and stuff like that. But the first case was an email from Darla Winstead to Heather Winstead, or vice versa, about, hey, my husband, Arthur Winstead, died, and someone talked to me about helping me with grief and told me to go to the grave site, and there was a guy who I was like, are you Arthur? Are you my Arthur? And he's like, some of him. And that was scary. That was Adam. Adam was there. That was Adam. And I love that Elric, I guess, was teased as far as the first episode. Love planning. I love when stories are written, knowing where they're going to. And so, yeah, Adam listed in this episode the names that he had taken before. One of them was Arthur Winstead, which is the name of the dead guy in the first case in the first episode. So that's really fun. Adam's entire story with Dr. Augustine, I really liked it. I really enjoyed this episode. This entire episode's amazing, especially coming off last episode. This episode was really fun, and the case itself of Adam, the assessment, the CAT DPHW, that's specifically about Adam's story, but not about like the entire thing, which includes a lot more stuff, Zora Trader, Booth, etc. But it's really fun that this Adam's story feels very similar to Dr. Frankenstein. I mean, it's a guy creating a guy doing stuff for something. He wants purpose, can't find it, comes to it's basically Dr. Frankenstein meets capitalism, because he goes to the capitalism that created him, and they're like, we don't want you, ew, gross, ew, get away. And he's like, you made me only to suffer, which I think that's an almost near exact quote from Frankenstein. I read the book like 3 years ago. I think that's a nearly direct quote Why did you make me only to suffer, or something like that. Really fun. I loved Adam so much. It sucks that he died. I wish I would have seen more of him, but he's dead. Oh well. Stranger, skin. He wore skin that was not resting right on him, and that caused people fear, but also End, because people were afraid of death and stuff like that, and he caused some fear. I think it's mostly Stranger than End, but it's a combination of both, you know? And yeah, that's it for the case. Last note I have is Celia did not balance with Sam in the other dimension. So as we saw earlier in the episode, she was like, "Oh, I feel a lot of regret about having freed myself from the pull of the rift," but Sam is there, and that sucks. It turns out, hey, actually, hey, girly, so don't have to be too bad because hey, it failed. Don't feel too bad. Which I think is fun. It's not surprising, but it's also slightly surprising. It's like I didn't see it coming, but also like, of course it wouldn't work. And it sucks, but I like it. I like that development a lot. And it's coming. I knew it was coming. I knew that some on the other shoe would drop. And that was really, really fun to see. So yes, that is all the last 4 episodes of the Magnus Protocol, episodes 43 to 46. Interesting run of episodes. I would say the first one, let me pull up my notes. 43, Sink or Swim, Diva, Slade. 44, Back to Basic. First, the Klaus program, fun. And then the description of Dread, awesome. 45, Transferal. This could have been an email. And then 46, Slipping. Really fun episode. Really good episode. Really, really happy with a little bit more descriptions of Elric. Keeping an eye out for any other names that might reoccur from this episode, or explanation of who the CEO, CFO is for Elric. I'm another staking claim. Anvil Kane, Elric. Teddy. Teddy's new job is probably with Elric. Maybe. That's what I'm guessing. Because if we bring in a third company, that's getting a little busy. Teddy is probably working with Elric, maybe. And yeah, that is it. I'm really excited for the next run of episodes because they're on Twitter. Anuja Battersby and Billy Hindle have tweeted before that they're really excited for us to listen to either episode 48 or 49. And like their tweets make me afraid. And those are coming up, and that's going to be in the next video. So I'm not going to be able. Those are going to be the middle of the 4 episode run. So that's exciting. And yeah, thank you so much for going on this journey with me. Thank you so much for sharing in these discoveries of this horror mystery podcast. Let me know what episode of these 4 did you like? What did you pull from these episodes the most? And what are you looking forward to in the next few episodes? And the latter half of, because we're already past the half of this season, we are into the last half of the entire show. And that's really exciting. So let me know what you're looking forward to as well. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Share with your friends. Let me know what you think. Don't forget to be passionate. And I'll see you later.